Okay, hello. How does this sound? Okay, awesome. So let's see if I can do this. I just loaded up the Academy lesson, just so you can kind of follow the precise procedures that I've set up for in the Academy. Keep in mind that the Academy is a little bit simplified. There's quite a lot of procedures involved in doing a Lunar Ascent. And then secondly, I don't know if I will be able to successfully do this, but we'll see. And okay, and is the sound okay in terms of volume versus desktop? You can probably hear the cabin ambience. Alright, cool. Alright, so don't worry too much about this text. I'm going to keep it there and then just kind of roger myself through them, just so you can see kind of what I'm doing in case I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. I'm just going to quickly do the procedures today, and then I'll see if I can get everything here working. And then also, of course, verify if all of this actually works properly still. Given that I'm now running on the latest public bits and not the test pilot branch, and then I'm also running this on a full screen kind of setup through Steam, so we'll see. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is to switch from our descent batteries. As you can see, we're currently on the lunar surface, and we're preparing to take off. So the first thing we need to do is to switch the batteries, and I'm just gonna proceed the tutorial to that point. And the batteries that we do want to use is, of course, the primary Ascent batteries. So we have battery number 5, and we're gonna just put that to up, actually down first and then up, and then battery number 6. There we go. And then we want to dead face the descent battery bay, which is done by putting this switch to dead face. There you go. Now all of the descent power has been taken offline, and the only thing that's now powering the ascent stage is battery 5 and battery number 6. The other batteries and the entire descent stage is going to be left on the lunar surface, which means that we're also going to lose the landing radar, but we don't need that for the ascent. Okay. The command module is in orbit around the moon, so if we now take a look at this, you can see that it's now orbiting the moon, and our job is to get into a similar orbit, just smaller, on the ascent, and then we'll slowly kind of try to perform rendezvous burns to catch up with this. There's a couple of procedures that I'm working on to get this even better, but for now we're going to use a Hoffman burn to rendezvous instead of an trigger angle burn. Okay, so I'm also going to check the Discord chat, the Twitch chat a little bit, just in case, but I might miss some of your questions, so just tag me or something if you need to get a hold of me. Okay, so our ignition time is basically 70 seconds after the command and service module has passed the landing location, which means that it goes over our heads and then continues into the orbit. 70 seconds later, we need to fire our ascent engine and catch up with it. And in the end rendezvous with it. Okay. So to be able to calculate that, I've created this very simple helper function. You just hit request ascent, and the game should be able to quickly just let you know when the passing will happen and when you should do the ignition. And that's okay. So the Ascent program is program 12 on the LGC. So we're going to start by just running this program. 1, 2. And if you take a look at this timestamp, this is the time of ignition. It's quite ahead of me in time. The reason for this is that this academy kind of gives you a lot of time to do these preparations and read through things if you want to. Just make sure that you have enough time. But usually program 12 and doing some of the things that I've already done is done much closer to the ignition. Alright, and then we're gonna hit Pro. This is showing kind of our predicted insertion values. For example, 32 is that we do want to kind of get an h-dot or vertical speed of 32 once we get into orbit. Okay, and let me also just verify one little thing. Just make sure that yes, we're still on noun 76. Okay, and then I'm going to set roll to up, or mode count, pitch to mode control. And then I'm going to set the mode kind of just to off for now. We just need to remember to put it on. Okay, next we need to pressurize the ascent stage. I'm just going to do this the quick and dirty way, so I'm going to hit master arm to up. I'm going to reset this, and then I will trigger the explosion that will allow the helium to go through the ascent stage and pressurize it. I'm also going to set the landing radar to the middle position, PGNS. This is because we're not going to be using the landing radar during the ascent, so we want these tapes to show what the computer has in its memory. And there we go. Next, we are going to arm the engine, so we're going to arm the Ascent engine. It resets some relays basically, and that's it. And then we want to do the actual abort to leave the Ascent stage behind, which is just the staging part of this. Okay, now that we have the stage already, we can just put this master arm to off. I'm going to use timescale. If you're doing the TLI Academy, we could probably debug it at the Discord, but of course you need to make sure that the lunar injection switch is set to up or inject basically, or else you're not allowing the stage 4B to ignite. And we're now pretty much set up for ignition. I have full control over my time warp, usually. The CSM is now about to pass us above our heads. I'm just going to do warp for 49 right now. I've set the PGNS to off, so it's not going to do much yet. Yeah, no, I was just joking. It happens. Alright, we're ascending. Pitching. And there should be an ascent card in the checklist here somewhere, I think. And that's that, of course, this is the Lunar Module. I've been playing the command module way too much lately. I do wonder if this one has it. Yeah, here we go. You can try to follow this, but it doesn't really matter much now. Let's verify our attitude. And we're not perfectly aligned with this, so you can, if you want, just disable roll and yaw just to make sure that you're not getting out of alignment. But this also means that you will need to do manual adjustments if needed to. This is just if you want to do it kind of a little bit simplified. And the ascent will take about 7 minutes. We also want to make sure that we pull this one down to jets. We're not going to be able to use throttle anymore. That's for the descent stage. We want to enable our controller to control the jets in the RCS instead of doing throttle in the up axis, up and down basically. Yeah, no problem. I'm not. It might happen that I'm not able to do this, but we'll see. And of course, I'm following very simplified steps. If you want to kind of follow all the real procedures, you can by just taking a look at this checklist. It should cover most of the ascent and what each of these registers are. Does look a little bit angry. I really like this ascent stage. It just looks so weird and cool somehow when it does its ascent without, you know, its landing legs or anything. There's Earth. like the A10, yeah. And the things that you should pay attention to is, of course, your rate and your altitude. And I think we're going to be closing in around 50,000 feet of an altitude, and then you should try to level off and minimize the energy it takes on building vertical speed. Like for example, now we're having a little bit of vertical speed still, and we're building altitude. But then eventually we want to transition most of that energy into building orbital speed instead. I think that our target was around 32 feet per second. It's probably not going to reach that target perfectly, but we'll see. And we don't have these readouts for the ascent stage. I think that these are mostly for the descent stage. Tank 1 and Tank 2. Yeah. Yeah, the entire ascent procedure is kind of advanced if you take a look at the real thing. And re-entry is a little bit simplified. Once I get the trigger angle and the math and kind of the procedures are all ready, but then of course it needs to be kind of implemented in a way that makes sense and made tutorials and stuff like that. But once you get the trigger angle, you can actually do the entire terminal phase burn quite accurately, including mid-course navigations on that final burn, and then the braking burns to do the docking itself, and it should be quite accurate. Okay, now I'm going to connect the Ascent engine, fuel, and oxidizer into system A, and I'm going to do the same for system B. The Lunar Module has two different systems, independent system for doing RCS, and that's system A and system B. And this basically allows me to spend the remaining fuel in the ascent stage to doing RCS maneuvers. Okay, and now we should be in orbit, and then I'll see if, let's see. I just want to make sure that I'm following the Academy steps, just to not skip ahead of anything, so you guys can't easily reproduce some of these steps. Alright. We are in orbit. And one of the new things I introduced in the latest update is, of course, to show the orbit data of the Lunar Module. And you can see that we're now currently in a pretty good orbit when it comes to our initial orbit, and what we need to do now is to circularize it first. That's the CSI maneuver, and then we have the next maneuver, which will then be the rendezvous itself. Okay. Now comes, of course, the hard part. So the first thing that we want to do is to, of course, locate our friends in the command module. And to do that, we're going to use the radar. What I usually do now is to manually just pitch this into kind of a prograde direction when it comes to my window, so I'm kind of looking into the way I'm flying, because that gives me a little bit more control. We're gonna also hook up the Rendezvous Radar. So this one provides AC power to its motors. The Rendezvous Radar will function as long as kind of this fuse is in, but it's not going to be able to move without a motor, so this is what kind of gives AC power to it. Let's complete our Ascent program. That's program 12. Thank you. So now I'm going to switch into pulse mode. I'm just going to give it a couple of yes, I'll show the external view of the Rendezvous Radar. I'll just get into a proper attitude first. It doesn't really need to be exactly 0, but I'm just going to do it now. Okay. Now, if I go to the external view, you can see that the radar on top here is the Rendezvous Radar, and it has this motor that allows it to look into a few kind of let's see, I'm just gonna make sure that I tell this the correct way. In real life, it couldn't look in every single direction, but it can be rotated and pitched. But in re-entry, allow you to rotate it to anywhere you want, just for simplicity. But of course, I'm gonna later model that it cannot go through the exterior of this. But right now, you can actually do that. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of how that works. So to be able to control the Rendezvous Radar, I of course need to have it powered and enabled, and then I can use this slew function to move it around. And if you look at the input mapping, you can bind the slew controls. I have it by default set to control and then the arrow keys. So I think that if I now press that, you can see that I am basically moving the Rendezvous Radar. So what I want to do now is to try to find the command and service module, and for that I'm going to use a crew member function that allows me to kind of enable the crew member to tell me how much I should slew the radar. So Rendezvous Radar slew, and then request, and then we have this guy who is basically the guy next to me named Paul. He tells me that I need to slew the shaft up, which is something I can do. And then if I also pay attention to the no-track radar, once we have proper signal, you can see that we're getting signal here. I can get a bit better signal by aligning it much better. And then I can switch this one to auto-track. And now if I do very slow maneuvers, I should be able to auto-track the CSM. And if I now go to external view, the CSM should be like right in front of me in kind of this direction. So yeah, we're not going to be able to see it yet, but I'm just going through the chat. Yeah, awesome. glad to hear this. Very happy. Spent a lot of time of my life doing this stuff, so it's good that it's appreciated. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is, of course, I'm just going to progress the tutorial. It basically tells you what I just said. We have no track, and we have the slew. And what I usually do is I reprogram this thing a little bit. So now I can just hit OK, and it will just go away until you put it back to slew, and it's not being able to track it. Then it will tell you, okay, you need to move it a little bit more. That way you can always get the help when you need it without, going into the crew members menu all the time. Okay, so you notice that I manually oriented the spacecraft to kind of programmed previously. What I can do now is to let the Rendezvous Radar tell me where I should be looking to be able to look directly at the CSM. So for that I'm going to use program 20. So I'm going to run 20. And this one, if I remember correctly, this one shows input from the radar. And this one is on distance. And I think I can just pro through this and it will run in the background. Yeah, okay, there it shows this shaft and trunnion angles. There we go. That's program 20 enabled. And if I now put the attitude control, it should try to target me towards the CSM. And this applies, of course, for the targeting needles as well. Another thing that I'm going to do is to just enable the orb rates. And then I can hit this to pulse. And then I can set my exterior lighting to track. And this will basically make this thing blink, which means that I think it's the beacon. It can then be detected by the command module once I get closer to it. Okay, and now we're going to go back into kind of familiar territories if you've been playing this game before, and that's kind of using program 30 to plan a burn. So first thing we want to do is that you can see that this button has now been changed into request CSI instead of request Ascent. So if I click this now, we should be able to get some parameters, a delta V of around 50 feet per second. That sounds correct. The burn is scheduled for 129.25, which is also quite close. So I think that this data seems okay. So I'm just going to then run P30. Yeah, I'm going to move the VR player into the head. Are you referring to Gemini and Mercury now? It's just a camera point. Keep in mind that everything VR is very preliminary. Basically, I try to solve the hard things first, and then once I got that working, most of the things is kind of design and systems design and mechanics of how I want to, do VR interactions and stuff like that. All right, where I'm on P30. I'm gonna hit Pro. 50.4. That's correct. And this one now calculates its kind of predicted end orbit, and it's 43.9 and with AP and perigee 43.8, which basically is a very circular orbit, and that's kind of the intention of the CSI, is to bring it into a circular orbit. And then of course the delta V is showed here. We're 35 minutes away from the burn. One of the big differences is of course that we're now performing all the burns using our RCS thrusters. So that's these jets here you can see, and one of its benefits is that the RCS can burn in any direction basically. It goes up, it can go sideways, and it can go forward or back and so on, which means that we have full control of our burn, and our attitude doesn't really matter that much. But of course it's easier to just burn you know, straight forward using these ones, just like for example a prograde burn. So I'm going to do that in this mission, but you don't have to do this. You can burn in any direction. But before that, I will of course have to timescale a little bit. The thing is that we're going to use this event timer to count down for the burn. There's no event timer in program 41, which is the RCS burn program. So we'll need to set this up together with P30. So you can choose basically any time you want, but I'm usually saying like 5 minutes, but I know that a lot of people set 10 minutes to get a little bit more time to do some of these things. So first I'm just making sure that it's all reset, it's 0, and then I'm gonna set the count direction to down, and then I'm gonna set it to 5 minutes, and I'm doing that by right clicking this switch. This will increase the unit, and this will increase tens. So then I'm gonna right click 5 times, and it should be 5 minutes. And then we're let's see, 33 minutes away from the burn now, so I'm going to time scale. And when I time scale, of course the Rendezvous Radar is going to lose track. I think that it can follow around 5 degrees per second. So what I tend to do is to give it a little bit of oops, that's the I had a little bit of an offset on my hand on the keyboard there. There we go. Just giving it a little bit of a nudge. So it doesn't drift too far off. Attitude hold. Attitude hold is a nice way to perform these burns. It basically means that you can have full control in all of these axes. And if you release the joystick, it will stop. And if you hold it, it will accelerate to a given rate, and then it's going to maintain that rate until you release the joystick. And there we go. So what I'm going to do now is to just move this to prograde, because if I do recall, it should be on orbital rate. Yes. Okay, and with that said, I think that we can move on with the tutorial. One thing that I want to mention here is that don't trust the primary guidance system. I wrote it first of all, so it contains bugs, and it can kind of go wonky sometimes. So what you want to do is to always own your attitude and always own your trajectory. If you see that a burn goes over, well, hit prograde to stop the burn. This applies for the SPS and descent things, for example. The same applies for Ascent. You should always verify that your attitude is correct, and that if the primary guidance system takes you off and starts rolling you slightly, you need to pay enough attention so you can notice those rolls. It's kind of the same for an airplane when you're playing flight simulators. When you're doing an ILS landing and you suddenly see that the aircraft is behaving strangely and it's putting the nose directly towards the runway, you do want to pull that stick and go to manual, right? And this same things applies here. You need to kind of look at your instruments and make sure that things are okay. And then yes, the attitude to hold, I think if I recall correctly, it should be following the digital autopilot, but I don't remember exactly. But I think it can. So the DAP is usually set up using verb 48, and the entire setup for the DAP is also available in the PGNS section. You can hit DAP setup, which kind of shows you a very similar setup to the command module, and the only thing that you need to care about is R1, and you can set this entire thing to have a on D&E, which is basically the deadband and then the maximum rates that you want to do. Okay, we're waiting for 5 minutes. I'm glad to hear that. Just reading some of the comments in the chat. Alright. This is the time that you don't want to, be too hasty and miss some of these windows, because if you do, you're going to have some problems. Then verify 5 minutes. We're going down and starts the timer. There we go. Let's verify that. That timer kind of matches this one, and that's what we want. Now we're 5 minutes from our first burn. Then we can just hit Pro to end program 30, because the timer is now moved over here. And then I can start program 41. This is whoops. This is the Rcs Burn Program. It basically allows me to burn in a given direction, a vector, based on your delta V, and then try to null the registers to reach the velocity that you have planned. So first, we're just going to allow the auto maneuver. It doesn't really matter. And then we can see now 85, and this is the entire magic. This is calculated now based on my attitude and the direction that I want to burn. I need to use the RCS to burn a little bit forward mostly, but then also a little bit up, because I'm not facing in the exact same direction as the burn vector. So what I can do now is to use these values and the attitude indicator to just maneuver all the way until these are at least below 1. This is 0.3 to 1, and stop. And it's very easy to kind of try to null everything here and be very precise, because you have some minutes to go all perfectionist if you want to. So what I'm doing now is that if I burn, okay, it's night. If I now burn in with the aft thrusters only, I will kind of channel all the energy into this direction. So that's straightforward. Right, we're a couple of minutes away. Yeah, not using timescale is also part of the fun sometimes. 1 minute from burn. And it's always good to kind of use this data here to just fine-tune your burn perfectly. Because I'm still working on kind of the logic that calculates how much sooner I need to start the burn. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect, but it's nice to just make it good enough at least, manually. Right. 10, 9, 8, and there's no indication of this burn start. And I usually just start a little bit early too. Maybe even 10 seconds early, because I'm still working on that logic. And now we're just trying to null this, and I'm also looking at the data here on the orbit data to just verify that things are kind of okay. This is a game after all, and not a real thing, which means that there might be some offsets in my calculations, and we need to always own the trajectory, so make sure you compensate for that. Let's see how close we get if we null this. 5 feet left, 3, 2, 1, and cut. That's a little bit too much. It was 5 seconds earlier was quite okay. I can pull it back a little bit. Right, it doesn't work. So now I can use I to thrust a little bit upwards to kind of circulate the orbit perfectly based on the up vector. It basically very slightly moves some velocity, because I'm not perfectly at the perigee or perfectly at the apogee, which allows me to shape the orbit a little bit in between. Anyways, I think that this is a pretty good orbit. So now if I hit F3, you can see that my orbit is quite nice, and I'm now in a smaller orbit compared to the target, which is the command and service module. So what's happening right now is that for every second I'm getting closer and closer to the CSM, and then I eventually will go under it and then past it, because an orbit that's bigger has more energy, but it also travels slower around the body, the moon in this case. While an orbit that's smaller, it has larger velocity, so it goes faster to go around the moon. It needs to travel, basically it means that it needs to travel faster to not fall down and hit the surface. Okay, so we're still on the night side, and we're going to now catch up with this. So we're going to do a few procedures in between, so I can close the map view, and I'm going to proceed with the lesson. Okay, so let's reset the event timer. I'm going to stop, reset, it's 0, pull this down to down, it is stopped, and then 5 minutes again. Okay, and then it's time to, I think, go into the CSM a little bit. I'm going to end program 41 as well. So this basically tells you that we're in a circular orbit, slowly catching up. let's see, the Rendezvous Radar has been able to track the CSM during the entire burn, which means that I didn't maneuver too much, and that's a good thing. We don't need to do that again. Now I need to enter the command service module, and this one is now of course ahead of us, and I can use program 79 to make so this one kind of tries to face the direction of the lunar module based on the state vector, and that's possible because of the rendezvous radar being connected and the state vector is able to update. So now I can do program 37 and then 79. Then I'm gonna allow it to auto maneuver. There we go, and then I'm gonna accept this data and start the maneuver. And this is of course going to take some time to start facing the direction of the lunar module. The other thing that I can do, and this is fully optional, is to turn on the rendezvous light, and then I can also of course do the EVA light just because it's kind of cool. It's this thing that comes up. You can actually see that it's being animated. Then you have the rendezvous radar, which should be visible from the lunar module eventually. Then I'm also going to toggle the COAS just to have that ready, and then I'm also going to quickly check that. Okay, this is an extend, it's ready to capture. All good. This is done later in the tutorial, but I just decided I wanted to check it. If you can double check things, always do it. Especially when you're getting this close to kind of the final things. Alright, and then we're going to do the next burn. This is called, I think it's terminal phase initiation. And this is basically an exact same maneuver, and it tells us at 131.19, it's a little bit ahead of time. We will be catching up so much with the CSM, it's going to probably be in this location. So we've been traveling, closing in around the moon, and then at this location, maybe even here, if we didn't burn, we will still catch up with it, but then our apogees will be at the exact same spot at the exact same time that this command module is at AP. So that's the entire burn maneuver that we're doing now. And then let's see. Rendezvous radar is okay still. Then let's set up the burn. This is exactly the same as we did earlier. 131.19 and 3 seconds and 0 hundredths or tenth. That's fine. And we know that the command and service module is in an orbit that's about 60 nautical miles above us, so this is seems to be all good. And of course the time is more than 100 minutes away, so what we're going to do now is to just time scale. Now I might even lose okay, it's counting down. I kind of like to just realign the rendezvous radar once in a while during this. I do know that I'm going to do a kind of a prograde burn. Okay. And then I'm gonna ask Paul for some help. That was the wrong direction. Then I'm going to just pull the radar. You can see that it was looking down, up towards 0 degrees. There we go. And then we can start time scaling again. Yeah, I used Paul to kind of target the radar and then get the node tracking again. And we're still aiming for that 5-minute mark. The reason why the Lunar Module is rotating is that I'm still working on the gravity rotational force things in the TSS engine. Whoops, there I went a little bit too far. I was talking. But that doesn't matter, we can correct that. Reset. 2, 3, 4, and let's do 4 minutes instead. Timescale is always very, very scary in this game. This game is brutally unforgiving. Especially when my head is so tired as it is right now. There we go. 4 minutes, counting down. Kind of matches. Yes. Okay, and then I think that we can don't forget the time, thank you. We can turn this one off and then go into program 41. And now, once again, we'll just make sure that we try to null the registers so we can get most of the burn in the forward direction. Oh, I'm not too tired, it's just I feel it. This is when the fun starts. I actually really like this entire ascent. It's a fun procedure and I get to have some fun in my own game. Now if we take a look outside, you can see that we're now getting closer and closer. And once again, this is a 20 feet per second burn, so it's gonna take, I think, 30 seconds or something. So I'll start about half the time ahead of the 0 here. And the thing here is that this one won't start counting down until it actually starts the time of ignition, but it will still apply the offset that I do ahead of this burn to this, so you won't miss anything. Let's try with 15 seconds ahead. 2, 1, and burn. Now this one should jump. And this should match with this 47. It's a little bit too much, but I don't think that this would matter too much, but I can correct this. 47.7. I think this is a pretty good burn. The more I adjust this now, of course, I'm moving AP ahead or backwards, so you don't want to do it too much, but very small things like this doesn't really matter. Okay, so now if we take a look at the orbit view, you should be able to look at our AP, and you can perform some even looking at this orbit view, if you know your prograde, you can start shaping your orbit to match these points if you want. But I'm not going to do so. I'm going to keep it as it is. The next thing that I want to do is perform a manual braking once or braking, accelerating, call it whatever you want, once you get into the AP point, which means that I'll need to move my perigee, increase it, or else it's going to be very hard to do the docking, because you will be constantly trying to fall and you only have basically one shot of doing that. So now we're going to use timescale. I'm also going to go into the CSM. It will need to do some realignment. Then I think that, I do wonder if we're able to see it yet. It's very hard at this distance. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on that now. Oh yeah, we also need to insert the docking target. So the docking target should be placed in this window. There we go. It's basically this glowing target that kind of acts like the one that you have on your roof in the Lunar Module. If I now go into external view, you will be able to see the target in the window here, and you can align it perfectly. It's kind of the same if this is the Lunar Module. You can see that if you're looking at it from an angle, it's not aligned, but if you coming at it perfectly like this, you know that you have the correct attitude. Okay. I can also, in the command module, use DMS to kind of get some ranging data. Then I'll just let this one spit in. It's very far, so it's kind of very shaky in the signal, but that's fine. Okay, let's use a little bit of time scale to get closer to our rendezvous, and you can basically see our lunar module slowly catching up and then eventually going a little bit in front of it. And then you can see that the distance between them are also shrinking, but we're still below it, so we're going faster. Then eventually, for example in this burn, I'm slightly ahead when we do the rendezvous. There we go. And now I need to prepare for the next burn, and I'm just going to manually do it here. But once, of course, I get the... you can start doing the docking now if you want to, and that's completely fine. But once we get the trigger angle rendezvous things added to the game, then this procedure will be slightly different, and it will contain a lot more users of the computer as well to plan some mid-course correction burns as we're getting along here. But the cool thing is that you can render cool graphs such as your relative location and use that as a tool. Okay, you can see that we're quite close to the command module. Actually, it's now in front of the window. And now it's all about just burning in the correct direction. So I'm facing now retrograde because the CSM is behind me. So what I want to do now is to look at this orbit view and then start the burn. And I'm doing a prograde burn because I want to increase the position of the perigee. And you can see that it's not perfect because you can see AP is starting to drift off a little bit, but not much. Then I'm gonna burn a little bit on my normal and then just shape this manually using this data. It's pretty good. It doesn't really matter, I don't need to do that because it's straight in front of me. I can basically just fly towards it. And now I'm going to enter the CSM, and I need to get my transponder connected with the Lunar Module. So what I'm doing now is to just maneuver so it looks towards it, and I can use these pointers here to kind of guide me into the correct direction. And as always, you have the option to use direct, which means that you can push this all the way into deflection, and it will kind of just use jets to help the primary system a little bit. So I have that enabled, and I should be able to... And this is direct, of course, so it's an acceleration command. And I'm just going to use backspace. It's a little cheat code because of time. We're running a little bit lengthy on the video, but I'm sure some of you guys are still here. And then we're getting into kind of... There you can see the Lunar Module in front of me there. And the command module from the Lunar Module. And now the fun starts part. What I usually do is to use the command module as the most active spacecraft during docking. But you can use whatever you want. It's all up to kind of the fuel that you have left. But we do have some fuel left because we didn't spend as many burns so it would be in a realistic scenario to get up here. So now I'm just going to start translating manually and start doing these things. I'm very close to it. I think that now if I look at the range, you can actually see the range in real time here, and it's closing in. And your job is to basically now just get ready to capture it. Alright, awesome. That's cool. And there we I think this is so awesome to just see this. Imagine it's so fun to think that we were on the lunar surface earlier. And what I can do now is to go into free mode or attitude hold. I'm going to actually go full manual now. I don't want to have any extra rates. And you can use translations to try to center the Lunar Module on the window, because it's going to drift a little bit. And what you want to do is to just do some kind of smaller mid-course corrections as you start closing in on this. Then I'm going to go into the Lunar Module, and I can see that I'm still closing in. I'm in the command module. And then I'm going to start using this to center this, and this final thing here is actually quite hard, and it will require quite a lot of practicing. So spending time just maneuvering and doing formation flying between these two crafts will teach you a lot, but you will need to invest time in doing this this docking procedure here, because it's quite a lot to it. What I'm going to do now is to get into the Lunar Module again, and then I'm going to start to do a flip, because the thing here is that if you now go to external view, we want our docking port is on the roof, so we need to pitch down 90 degrees so this one can capture this. I'm just going to spend a little bit of extra fuel here to speed this process up a little bit. pitching to around 90 in pitch. There we go. Now comes the hard part. And keep in mind that if you're in the Lunar Module and you want to do the docking yourself, you will need to first, and this is a little bit tricky, you need to use the overhead window button here. And then let's see, where are we? That's the COAS. And if you want to do the docking with this one, remember that your controls are basically all off, because you're now looking through your window and not forward, which you are used to. So now you will need to invert a lot of these things. But I'm going to do this from the command module. The command module is much heavier and a little bit slower to move around with. And by looking at the target, you can see that I'm a little bit below this. Let's close in. And rate command helps in this case, really. And now it's all about capturing. I'm having a lot of focus right now, sorry. Whoops. Am I okay? Did I forget to do something? This doesn't look right. There we go. I don't think that I would consider that a very good docking, but it did hit it. The way that you actually the function works that way, that you need to be within set alignment, and then there's a small collider in front of this port with the other one, so you need to be quite lined up. To remember that the sights aren't perfectly aligned up with the real thing, but it doesn't really matter, because once you get very close to it, your nose is already basically in it, or even if you're offset by a few centimeters, it will show as a quite large offset on the target itself. So let's also go into the Lunar Module, and you can see that the CSM is now nicely docked here. So what you want to do now is, of course, to go into the docking probe and retract it. It's going to take 30 seconds to retract the probe and secure the Lunar Module. But yeah, capture. That was fun. 0 range. And I can probably turn off that annoying lamp, of course. It does have a docking light as well. Off. There it comes up. You can see that it's actually animated, it's coming out. And then just to get the proper picture, even though it's not yet properly modeled, I should be able to get this one out. So there we go. And then, of course, if we can, open the hatch. Yeah. Right. And now people can kind of move in from the Lunar Module, and once that's done, you can get rid of it and leave it in, orbit around the moon, and then you'll use the new function to get back home. But before you can do that, you should correct your orbit, because you did a lot of maneuvering. So you can see that the orbit is a little bit offset, not much, but you can just fine-tune this if you want to make this all kind of circular. Alright, and with that, I think that it's time to end the stream. If you guys are, want to chat more, I'll be at the Discord, and I'll be answering some questions and so on. And then, of course, if you're feeling ready for it, I know that this is an immensely long procedure in one tutorial, but if you're up for it, give it a try. Alright, thank you everyone.